This past year, really year and a half, we've seen major attacks on student voting. And in particular, we've seen efforts to remove early voting sites from campuses. That's impacted students not just at North Carolina A&T, but at Elon, Western Carolina University. And really, it's been, for years, it's been an ongoing thing about the ability for students to vote on campus. Can you talk a little bit about like what elections advocacy, but also early voting and this entire conversation, the impact that it has on students, and also people who just work at universities and live around the areas?
Right. Yes. No, it's definitely very unfortunate. I think, when we're limiting and even removing early voting sites from colleges or restricting hours that they're open, they are direct attacks on uh, college student voting access. I think, especially because college voters go through unique challenges that maybe older generations don't often consider. I'll especially talk about A&T. Freshman students aren't allowed to have cars. So if you move a polling site from being on campus to being somewhere else, you have to hope that a freshman student or whoever has an upperclassman buddy that they can catch a ride with to the polls, or that they have the money for taking rideshare, like catching a Uber or Lyft, and that's just not always realistic. And so you're definitely taking away that level of access for that population, but it also creates confusion, right? Like when, people and students are used to voting at a specific polling site and have been for years, they may not be properly made aware that that polling site is no longer there. And so then they have to go through the work to figuring out, okay, well, where am I now located? And also A&T is split into different zip codes. So they may have a different polling site from if you stay on the north side of campus compared to the south side of campus. So it's all these different things that, people who are not in college may not consider. And I also think that goes beyond A&T, but A&T specifically is the largest HBCU, not just in North Carolina, but in the nation. And you're taking away that access to be able to, voice your concerns and elect those who you wish from the university who has the most, you know, Black students. And so I think it's definitely an attack on college student voting when you are removing those polling sites from college campuses. And also, to your point about people who work there, right? So not just students use the polling site, but professors, deans, you think about the dining hall workers, you think about parking services, the library, people who work in the student union, like all these people could rely on having a campus voting site that they can easily go to vote at before or after their shifts. And so they would then have to be able to go out of their way and go somewhere, come like somewhere else. And so that's definitely, discouraging people from wanting to go vote.
One of the kind of arguments I've heard around student voting, and it's not a new argument, but it's one that they keep using, is that these students aren't really from here, so it shouldn't be easy for them to vote here. But clearly, you're a student, you are deeply involved. Can you talk about like how do students see themselves in the political homes when they're on campus, and why is it important that we consider students as residents and as voters?
Right. And that type of notion and rhetoric that just because you're from a different area, you can't vote here is, far from the truth. Because as a college student, you're living on your college campus or in the area 8 months out of the year. So you're spending the majority of the time in that area. And then going on top of that, um, you are not just voting for, the president or state elections, you're also voting for local elections. And so, as we know, those kind of decisions affect people a lot sooner than, decisions that are made on a federal level. So, if you are removing the right to vote from, someone who lives in Greensboro or Durham or Raleigh or wherever, just because, they're from a different state, you're denying them the opportunity to have a say in a community where they live the majority of the time now. And oftentimes, a lot of students who graduate stay in the same state. So you want them to be able to feel as though they have a say in what's going on because they should, and they do.